The lunch rush had just begun when the small city restaurant filled with the familiar sounds of clinking plates, soft chatter, and the faint hiss of the espresso machine. The place wasn't fancy, but it was warm and welcoming, the kind of spot where regulars felt comfortable and new customers often returned because of the friendly service. Among the staff moving quickly between tables was a young waitress named Lena, known for her gentle voice, calm nature, and ability to handle even the toughest customers with grace. She had worked here for 2 years, long enough to understand every corner of the dining area, every usual order, and every type of personality that walked through the doors. On this particular day, Lena felt a little tired. She had taken an early shift and barely slept the night before, but she pushed herself to smile and move with her usual steady rhythm. Her co-workers often admired how she managed to stay patient even when the restaurant got too loud or customers grew demanding. To her, kindness was always worth the effort. Just as Lena placed a tray of drinks on a nearby table, the front door swung open with a sharp push. A woman in an expensive coat walked in, followed by 2 others dressed just as well. They looked like they had come straight from a luxury shopping trip, their bags hanging from their arms, their perfumes trailing behind them. The woman in front held her chin a little higher than necessary, as though the air inside the restaurant was somehow beneath her. The hostess smiled politely and welcomed them, but before she could finish, the woman waved a hand as if brushing away a fly. She didn't wait to be guided. Instead, she marched straight to an empty table near the center and sat down. Her friends followed, sharing a quiet laugh as though amused by her dramatic entrance. Lena noticed the small scene while wiping down a counter. She took a deep breath. She had seen people like this before, those who thought money was a reason to treat others poorly. Still, she reminded herself that everyone deserved respect, and she walked toward the table with her usual calm expression. "Good afternoon," she said softly. "Welcome. May I bring you anything to start?" The woman didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked Lena up and down, slowly, almost as if inspecting a product. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and one side of her mouth lifted in a smug half-smile. Then she turned to her friends and muttered something under her breath, something in German. Her tone made it clear it wasn't a compliment. The friends gave each other quick looks, the kind that people share when they witness something uncomfortable but don't dare comment on it. One of them tried to hide a small laugh. Lena didn't react, keeping her expression steady, but she had understood every word. The woman had called her a simple little worker who probably barely knows anything. She had described her appearance as plain and suggested she should be grateful to serve them. The words carried a dismissive edge, sharp enough that even someone who didn't know German might have sensed the insult. Around them, the restaurant continued with its usual noise, but a faint tension seemed to settle over the area. A man at a nearby table paused mid-bite, his eyes shifting toward the group, sensing something off in the woman's tone. One of the woman's friends shifted uncomfortably in her seat, glancing at Lena with what looked like a hint of guilt. Lena nodded politely, pretending not to notice anything unusual. "Would you like something to drink?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. The woman finally looked directly at her. "Water," she said curtly, "and do try not to take too long." Her friends ordered as well, though with much softer voices, as if they were trying not to draw attention to themselves. Lena wrote everything down and thanked them, keeping her tone warm and steady. As she walked away, a small group of regular customers at a nearby table exchanged quiet glances. They had seen the interaction. They had seen the woman's expression, the mocking look in her eyes, and they knew Lena well enough to know she didn't deserve that kind of treatment. Lena reached the counter and poured the drinks carefully, focusing on her task even though her heartbeat had grown a little quicker. She wasn't angry. She had met rude customers before. But the insult had been unnecessary, and the way the woman used another language to hide it felt even more disrespectful. Lena took a slow breath, calming herself. She knew losing her temper wouldn't help anyone, but she also knew she didn't have to stay silent forever. When she returned to the table, she set the glasses down gently, one by one without making a sound. Her movements were precise and graceful, the opposite of the woman's loud, attention-grabbing manner. The woman leaned back in her seat and made another comment in German, this time louder, as if she wanted Lena to hear the insult even more clearly. It was about her job, her appearance, and the idea that she was beneath them. Her tone dripped with superiority. Lena felt the words. She heard every single one. But instead of reacting, she simply placed the last glass of water on the table and gave a gentle nod. "I'll be back with your menus," she said in a calm tone. The woman raised an eyebrow, almost disappointed that her cruelty hadn't stirred a reaction. Her friends looked uneasy. One of them whispered something to her, but she brushed it off with an annoyed sigh. As Lena walked away again, the tension continued to build. The customers around the table were paying attention now. Some looked irritated with the woman's behavior. Others seemed curious, sensing that something more was about to happen. Lena stepped behind the counter once more. She took a moment, resting her hands on the surface, staring at the menus she was about to take back to the table. She wasn't someone who enjoyed confrontation. She didn't like making scenes, and she never wanted to disrespect a customer, no matter how poorly they behaved. But the way the woman had spoken felt deeply wrong. Not just because the words were hurtful, but because she believed Lena wouldn't understand them. She believed her money and attitude gave her the right to belittle others without consequence. Lena exhaled slowly. She knew she needed to stay professional. She knew she needed to remain calm. But she also knew she wasn't powerless. People often assumed things about her background, her abilities, her intelligence. They saw a waitress and imagined she was limited to the job she was doing. They didn't know about her studies, her language skills, or the life experiences that had shaped her into someone resilient and steady. As she picked up the menus and prepared to return to the table, a quiet determination settled inside her. She wouldn't embarrass the woman or cause trouble. She didn't want drama, but she did want respect, something everyone deserved, regardless of their job or status. What Lena didn't realize yet was that the entire restaurant was slowly becoming aware of the situation. A few customers leaned slightly in their chairs. A couple whispered to each other. Even the manager, busy behind the counter, glanced up more often than usual, sensing something was off. Back at the table, the woman continued speaking in German, complaining loudly about the service even though no mistake had been made. Her voice carried across the room, sharp and heavy with entitlement. Her friends exchanged looks that suggested they were growing tired of the performance. When Lena approached again, the air around the table seemed to tighten. The woman gave one last smirk, ready to continue her quiet insults. She clearly believed she held all the power in the situation. But Lena walked with a steady, unshaken posture. She set the menus down gently, her expression calm, her eyes focused. For now, she said nothing. She simply gave them a polite smile and stepped back slightly, waiting for their order. The moment of truth hadn't come yet, but it was close. And although Lena didn't know it yet, the next few minutes would change the entire atmosphere of the restaurant. The moment Lena placed the menus on the table, the room felt even more tense than before. The woman in the expensive coat leaned back in her chair as if she owned the entire place. Her eyes followed Lena with a look that carried both amusement and superiority. For a second, it seemed like she was waiting for something. Maybe a mistake, maybe a sign of weakness, anything she could use to continue her performance. Lena kept her posture relaxed. She had learned over time that the most powerful reply to someone's arrogance was calmness. But calmness didn't mean she wasn't aware. She heard the whispers, the tone, the sharp edges hidden behind the German words. She felt the atmosphere shift each time the woman opened her mouth. The woman scanned the menu with an exaggerated sigh. "This place doesn't have much," she said in English this time, but loud enough for half the room to hear. "I don't know how people eat here regularly." One of her friends nudged her gently, whispering something under her breath. The woman simply waved her off with a flick of her hand. Then she leaned forward and whispered another comment in German. Her voice carried the same mocking tone, sharper than before. Lena stood still, holding her small notepad, giving them time. She waited with patience she had practiced for years. But inside, her mind was alert, listening, picking up every word. The woman clearly assumed no one around her knew the language. She probably thought German was safe for insults. A couple sitting a few tables away looked at Lena with concern. They had seen her handle many customers before, but this situation was different. It had a cruel edge to it. It wasn't just impatience or irritation. It was intentional. Lena finally asked, "Are you ready to order?" The woman looked at her again, slowly, as if trying to find something wrong with her. "I suppose," she said. "We'll start with the soup, and make sure it's hot. Last time I ordered soup somewhere, it was barely warm." Lena wrote it down. "Of course," she replied. Her friends ordered next. They kept their voices soft, almost apologetic. It was clear they were uncomfortable, but not enough to tell their companion to stop. Sometimes people preferred silence over conflict, even when they knew it wasn't the right choice. When Lena walked away, the woman leaned toward her friends again, muttering another line in German. This one carried a cruel sort of laughter with it, the kind people use when they're trying to impress an audience with their own rudeness. Lena pretended not to notice. She moved to the kitchen window, handing the order slip to the chef. But she wasn't alone for more than a few seconds before a regular customer approached her. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. Lena nodded. "I'm fine," she replied softly. He looked toward the table. "She's being rough for no reason." Lena smiled gently. "Some people speak loudly because they think no one is listening." The man gave a small nod. He admired her strength, the quiet way she handled things. Not everyone could remain steady under that kind of pressure. Lena returned to her tasks, wiping down a counter, carrying plates, refilling drinks. She didn't want her mind to stay stuck on one table. But even with all her experience, the sharp tone of the woman's insults kept echoing in her thoughts. Not because the words hurt her deeply, but because of the confidence the woman had while speaking them. She wasn't hiding her cruelty. She was displaying it, showing it off like a luxury item. Minutes passed, and Lena went back to check on them. The soup wasn't ready yet, but she wanted to make sure everything else was all right. Before she could speak, the woman was already talking again. "This service is slow," she said loudly. "I don't understand why places like this can't hire better staff." Her voice carried across the tables, pulling a few annoyed glances from the customers nearby. Lena kept her tone steady. "Your soup will be out soon. Thank you for your patience." The woman responded with another comment in German, this one sharper than the last. She said something about people like her not being capable of anything more than basic tasks. Lena heard it. She understood it. She felt the unfairness of it. But she didn't show any change in her expression. The woman paused, waiting for a reaction. When she didn't get one, she clicked her tongue and leaned back. Lena walked away again, but this time the manager noticed the tension in her face. He approached her gently. "You sure everything is okay?" he asked. "Yes," she said quietly. "I can handle it." He looked toward the table. He had seen rude customers before, but this woman stood out. Her voice carried a tone that created discomfort wherever it touched. "If you need me, I'm here," he said. Lena nodded. She appreciated his support. Even a small gesture like that helped soften the weight of the situation. When the soup was finally ready, Lena carried it to the table with careful hands. She placed each bowl gently in front of them. The woman stared at her and spoke again in German. This time, the words were aimed at Lena's intelligence. She questioned her abilities, her background, even her education. Her friends looked down at their bowls, suddenly very interested in the soup. They didn't want to participate in the insults, but they didn't stop them either. Lena felt something inside her shift. Not anger, not hurt, but a quiet firmness. She had always believed that respect was important. She had always tried to give people the benefit of the doubt. But this situation wasn't just about rudeness anymore. It was about dignity. Even so, she stayed calm and stepped back. "If you need anything else, please let me know," she said. The woman's smirk widened. She said another line in German, clearly expecting no one in the room to understand. But she didn't notice that a young man sitting a few tables away looked up sharply. He recognized the language too. His eyebrows lifted slightly in surprise. He didn't say anything, but he watched the scene with new curiosity. Lena returned to the counter and stood quietly for a few seconds. She wasn't upset in the way most people would be. She had learned how to separate her emotions from difficult moments at work. But she wasn't unaffected either. No one liked being insulted, especially not repeatedly and publicly. Still, she kept her calm. She took a sip of water, straightened her apron, and prepared herself to continue her shift. Back at the table, the woman took a spoonful of the soup and said, "It's too hot." She said it in a dramatic tone, as if the world was ending. One of her friends whispered, "It's fine." But the woman ignored her. She called out loudly, "Can we get someone who knows how to serve properly?" The entire restaurant went quiet for a moment. The manager stepped forward, but Lena gently raised her hand, signaling she wanted to handle it. She walked back to the table, standing with a gentle posture, her voice soft but steady. "Is there a problem with the soup?" she asked. The woman rolled her eyes and said, "I just said it. It's too hot. Do you understand English?" Her friends winced. Lena nodded. "I understand perfectly." The woman's lips curled into a mocking smile. She muttered another German insult, this one directed at Lena's ability to comprehend anything. And this time, Lena felt the entire situation reach a point she could no longer ignore. She didn't want to make a scene. She didn't want to create conflict. She didn't want to embarrass anyone. But she also knew she didn't deserve to be insulted repeatedly simply because someone thought she could get away with it. The restaurant was silent. People watched from their tables. Some leaned forward slightly, sensing something was about to change. The woman looked up with a smug expression, completely sure she had won whatever battle she imagined was happening. Lena took a slow breath. She was ready. She was calm. And she was done letting the woman believe she could say anything without consequence. The moment was coming. The moment the entire room would remember. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath as Lena stood beside the table, steady and calm. The woman in the expensive coat still wore that smug expression, as if she believed she had complete control over the moment. Her friends sat stiffly, uncertain of what might happen next. A few customers glanced over their shoulders to watch, pretending to sip their drinks just so they could stay turned in the right direction. Lena looked at the woman's untouched bowl of soup. She could still feel the heat of the earlier comments, not from the soup but from the harsh words spoken in German. The woman had been intentionally cruel, and she had done it with the confidence of someone who expected no consequences. But Lena wasn't going to argue or raise her voice. She didn't believe in reacting with the same energy someone else used to hurt her. She believed in calmness, in dignity, in letting her actions speak louder than anger. The woman finally lifted her chin and said, "Well, are you going to do something about this?" Her tone carried the same cutting sharpness that had been present since she walked in. Lena took a gentle breath. She didn't rush. She allowed herself a moment to choose her words carefully. Then, in a soft but perfectly clear voice, she replied in German, "Is the soup truly too hot?" she asked. "Or are you simply trying to find another reason to complain?" The woman froze. Her friends looked up so quickly that one of them nearly dropped her spoon. A couple at the next table stared wide-eyed, as if they had just witnessed something completely unexpected. The woman blinked several times, her confidence cracking just a little. "You?" she began, but the words stalled in her throat. Lena continued, still speaking fluent, steady German. "I understood every word you said earlier, every insult, every comment." The woman's mouth parted slightly. Her face shifted, losing its bold expression and gaining something closer to embarrassment. Lena didn't raise her voice. She wasn't trying to humiliate anyone. She simply spoke the truth, gently and clearly, for the first time since the woman had arrived. "I work here with honesty and kindness," Lena said. "I treat everyone with respect. I believe everyone deserves that, no matter who they are." Her words were simple, but they carried a quiet strength. The woman's cheeks flushed with color. It wasn't anger this time. It was something else. Something she wasn't used to feeling. Maybe shame, maybe disbelief, maybe a sudden realization that she had misjudged someone. Her friends exchanged glances, and one of them finally whispered in English, "I told you she might understand you." The woman shot her a quick glare, but her usual confidence didn't return. For a moment, she looked as though she didn't know what to do. She wasn't used to being challenged. Not by a waitress, not by anyone she considered below her. Lena looked at her with a calm expression. There was no anger in her eyes, only a quiet firmness. "If there's something wrong with your soup, I can fix it," she said, switching back to English. "But if the problem is something else, I can't help with that." The room remained silent. The woman opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. But the words she wanted to say wouldn't come out. It was as if the sharp comments and loud insults she was so used to throwing had suddenly disappeared. Someone across the room let out a small breath, the kind people release when they've been holding it for too long. A few others exchanged quiet smiles. Not one person in the restaurant supported the woman's earlier behavior. In that moment it became clear. The woman straightened her coat and tried to regain her posture. I didn't mean anything harmful," she said, though her voice trembled just slightly. Lena nodded politely. "I understand." She didn't push. She didn't mock. She didn't try to embarrass her further. Instead, she gently adjusted the bowl of soup. "Would you like it replaced?" The woman hesitated. Her friends looked at her, waiting for her response. Finally, she shook her head. "No," she muttered. "It's fine." Lena gave a small, respectful nod and stepped back. "If you need anything else, please let me know." Her voice remained warm, the same tone she used with every customer. There was no bitterness, no anger, just professionalism. As Lena walked away, the room seemed to slowly come back to life. People returned to their meals, though many of them still glanced toward her with admiration. One of the regular customers leaned toward his partner and whispered, "I knew she was special." Behind the counter, the manager watched with a mixture of pride and relief. He had always trusted Lena to handle difficult situations, but even he hadn't expected her to respond with such quiet strength. Meanwhile, at the table, the woman sat very still. Her expensive coat that once seemed like a symbol of her confidence now looked heavy on her shoulders. Her friends didn't speak for a moment, unsure whether to comfort her or let her sit with her thoughts. After several seconds, one of them leaned closer and whispered, "That was uncalled for. Everything you said earlier." The woman didn't respond. She stared at her soup as if it held all the answers she didn't want to hear. Her friend continued, this time more softly. She spoke so politely. "You didn't have to push her like that." The woman swallowed. For the first time since she entered the restaurant, her expression softened, not into kindness, but into self-reflection. "I didn't think she understood," she murmured. "That doesn't make it better," her friend replied. Another quiet moment passed. The woman finally lifted her spoon and tasted the soup. Her hands were no longer steady. Her well-practiced confidence had been cracked open in front of strangers. Across the room, Lena continued her work. She refilled drinks, carried plates, wiped tables. Her movements were just as calm as before, but something inside her felt lighter. She hadn't planned to say anything earlier, but she was grateful she had. She didn't want to live in a world where people thought they could treat others however they wanted without being accountable. As she passed a table near the window, an older couple smiled at her warmly. "You handled that beautifully," the woman said. Lena offered a small smile in return. "Thank you," she whispered. "It takes strength to stay calm like that," the man added. Lena nodded slightly and continued toward the kitchen, grateful for their kindness. Back at the center table, the woman took another spoonful of her soup, still avoiding eye contact with her friends. She seemed lost in thought, her earlier behavior replaying in her mind. Maybe she hadn't expected consequences. Maybe she hadn't expected someone like Lena to speak the same language she used for insults. Her friend finally broke the silence. "You know, you could apologize." The woman stiffened. "I don't apologize to waitstaff," she whispered. Her friend sighed. "Maybe that's the problem." The woman didn't respond, but she didn't argue either. Minutes passed. Lena came back to check on the nearby tables. She didn't approach the woman's table just yet. She wanted to give her space. The last thing she wanted was to make anyone more uncomfortable. The restaurant slowly returned to its usual rhythm, though the air still carried traces of what had happened. People had witnessed something unusual, something that reminded them that dignity wasn't loud or aggressive. Sometimes it was quiet, simple, and steady. The woman finally lifted her head, looking toward the counter where Lena stood organizing receipts. There was no anger in her eyes now, just a long, heavy thoughtfulness. Her friend said softly, "You should go talk to her." The woman took a deep breath. Her pride was fighting her, pushing against the idea of apologizing. But something else within her, the part that knew she had crossed a line, was slowly becoming stronger. After a long hesitation, she stood up. Her friends watched carefully, unsure what she would do. She took a slow step, then another. Her expensive shoes clicked softly against the floor, but this time the sound didn't carry confidence. Carried uncertainty. Lena looked up as she approached. Her expression remained calm, not defensive, not expectant. The woman stopped in front of her, opening her mouth to speak. But the words didn't come. Not yet. This moment, fragile and quiet, would be the turning point. The moment where pride met truth, and the woman had to choose what kind of person she wanted to be next. And everyone knew something important was just about to happen. The afternoon rush had just started to fade when the waitress returned to the counter, her mind still replaying the strange moment from earlier. The sting of the woman's insult in German had faded a little, but the weight of the memory still clung to her. She took a slow breath, trying to shake it off. It was not the first rude customer she had met, but something about that woman's tone had stuck with her more than usual. She wiped down a table near the doorway, moving carefully, as if avoiding the thoughts she did not want to hold. Outside the glass, the sky had turned a soft orange. People were slowing down, drifting home from work, and the busy street was settling into a calmer rhythm. Inside the cafe, the warm lights made the place feel comforting again. In moments like this, she reminded herself why she liked working there. Familiarity, routine, and quiet conversations that came and went. But the peace did not last for long. Just as she set the cloth down and turned toward the counter, she heard the cafe door open. The bell chimed, light and sharp. She looked up and felt her chest tighten. The same woman, the one who had insulted her earlier, walked in again. The woman's heels clicked against the floor, firm and confident, as if she owned the entire space. Her posture was tall, her chin slightly lifted, and although her expression was calm, there was a coldness in her eyes that carried the same energy as before. A man followed behind her, dressed in a neat suit, holding a folder close to his chest like he was guarding it. The waitress stood still for a moment. She assumed the woman had come back because something was wrong with her order, or maybe she wanted to complain. Her co-workers glanced over as well, sensing the tension right away. The rich woman walked straight to the counter, stopping only a few feet away. Her gaze locked onto the waitress with the same sharpness as before, but now there was something else behind it, something she couldn't quite read. "You," the woman said quietly. The waitress nodded politely. "How can I help you?" The woman didn't reply right away. Instead, she turned slightly and spoke to the man in the suit in a low tone before facing the waitress again. "What is your name?" she asked. Her voice wasn't rude this time. It wasn't warm either. It sounded careful, like she was choosing every word. The waitress told her. The woman repeated the name softly, almost testing how it felt in her mouth. Then she nodded, as if confirming something. The man beside her scribbled on a paper inside the folder. "I came back," the woman continued, "because I realized something after leaving earlier." The waitress kept her calm expression, though her heart had begun to beat faster. She didn't know what direction this conversation was heading in. The woman took a slow breath. "I spoke to you in German earlier. I assumed you wouldn't understand. And I also assumed I would never see you again." She paused, studying the waitress's face. "But your reply was fluent." Several customers nearby lifted their heads a little, pretending they weren't listening but clearly curious. The waitress didn't say anything. She wasn't sure if the woman expected an apology or a conversation. What you said, the woman continued, was not only correct, it was perfect. No accent. No hesitation. She narrowed her eyes slightly. Where did you learn German like that? The waitress gave a small shrug. I studied it earlier in my life. That's vague, the woman replied. Very vague. There was a moment of silence. The cafe felt oddly still. I misjudged you, the woman finally said, her voice softer now. And I don't like being wrong. The waitress wasn't sure how to respond. She simply nodded. The woman glanced at the man with the folder again. He stepped forward slightly, preparing himself to speak. But before he opened his mouth, the woman said, Not yet. She turned back to the waitress. Tell me something. Why are you working here? With skills like that, you could be doing something far more important. Something far better paid. The waitress didn't rush her answer. Life took a different turn, she said gently. I needed something steady. Something simple. Simple? The woman repeated quietly, as if the word didn't belong in her world. That's interesting. There was another moment of quiet. The woman stepped back slightly, adjusting her coat. But instead of leaving, she looked around the cafe slowly, scanning the tables, the decor, the lighting, the customers. Her expression softened again. Only a little. I have a proposal, she finally said. The waitress blinked, unsure if she heard correctly. The woman continued, But before we get into that, I want to ask you something else. She leaned forward just a little, her eyes more curious than cold now. When you replied to me in German earlier, how did you stay so calm? The waitress paused. For the first time, the question felt honest. Not a challenge, not a test, not arrogance. The woman genuinely wanted to understand. She answered quietly, Because anger only makes things worse. Calm words can say more. The woman looked at her for a long moment. Then she slowly nodded. The man with the folder stepped closer again. The woman gave him a small gesture, this time letting him speak. We would like to offer you a meeting, he said politely. A professional one. There is an opportunity we believe you may be suited for. The waitress's brows lifted. Me? Yes, the woman replied. You. There was a seriousness in her voice now. A weight, a meaning. But I understand if you need time to think, the woman added. We will not pressure you. The waitress hesitated. Her life was simple but stable. She didn't expect surprises. She didn't expect chances. And she certainly didn't expect anyone like this woman to come back with an offer. What kind of opportunity? She finally asked. The woman gave a small smile. Not a friendly one, but a respectful one. One that requires intelligence, calmness, and the ability to understand more than one language, she said. The rest can be explained later. The man with the folder handed over a business card. It had only a name and a phone number on it. If you decide you're interested, the woman said, call that number tomorrow. Not today. Tomorrow. The waitress took the card slowly. It felt heavy in her hand, like it carried a future she wasn't sure she was ready for. The woman stepped back and straightened her coat again. One more thing, she said quietly. I apologize for what I said earlier. It was unnecessary. The words were simple, but coming from her, they meant something. Without waiting for a reply, the woman turned and walked out of the cafe. The man followed, the door chiming behind them. The waitress stood still for a long moment. Her co-workers looked at her with wide eyes, whispering to each other. She finally looked down at the card again. Tomorrow. The word echoed in her mind. It was the first time in a long time that tomorrow didn't feel like it would be the same as today. She slipped the card into her pocket, took a soft breath, and went back to wiping the counter. But this time her hands trembled just a little. Not from fear, but from something new. Something that felt like possibility. The night felt longer than usual for the waitress. After her shift ended, she walked home slowly, turning the business card over and over in her fingers. The small piece of paper held so much weight that it felt almost unreal. She didn't know what kind of opportunity the woman had meant, and she didn't know why someone like that would return just to offer anything at all. But the seriousness in the woman's voice stayed with her all night. When she finally reached her small apartment, she placed the card on her table and stared at it for several minutes. The room was quiet except for the soft sound of a clock ticking on the wall. She made herself a simple dinner, but barely ate any of it. Her thoughts kept circling back to that moment in the cafe, the way the woman had looked at her, the apology she had given, and the promise of something she couldn't fully understand yet. She sat on her couch and tried to distract herself, but her mind was too full. She wondered why the woman cared about her fluency in German. Most people who worked in offices or companies didn't need such skills unless the job was specific. She wondered if the woman had seen something in her that she hadn't shared, or maybe it wasn't about her at all. Maybe it was just coincidence. By the time she went to bed, she knew she wouldn't sleep much, and she didn't. She woke up several times through the night, checking the time repeatedly, counting the hours until morning came. When the first bit of light entered through her curtains, she gave up on resting. She sat up, brushed her hair, and made herself a quiet cup of tea. The city outside was just beginning to wake. Cars moved slowly, and the air felt cooler than usual. She placed the business card on the table once again. The phone number printed in plain, bold digits seemed to stare back at her. Today. The woman had told her to call today. But what if she wasn't ready? What if she wasn't the kind of person they were looking for? What if calling created expectations she couldn't meet? She sat with those questions for nearly an hour. But then she remembered the calmness she had used the day before. The same calmness that had stopped the situation from turning ugly. The same calmness that had made the rich woman pause. She took a deep breath, picked up her phone, and dialed the number. The line rang only once. A man answered, his voice calm and professional. She introduced herself. There was a moment of silence on the other end, and then the man spoke as if he had been expecting her. Thank you for calling. We can arrange a meeting today if you're available. Are you free this afternoon? She agreed before she could overthink it. He gave her an address, one she recognized as a part of the city she rarely visited. A place filled with tall buildings, quiet streets, and offices she never thought she'd have a reason to enter. After the call ended, she took another breath and stood up to get ready. She chose clothing that was neat but simple, nothing too formal but nothing too casual either. As she tied her hair back, she felt her nerves starting to rise. But she reminded herself calmness. A few hours later, she arrived outside a tall building made of glass and metal. The entrance looked too clean, too polished. She hesitated for a moment, standing on the sidewalk, watching people in suits walk in and out like they belonged there. She didn't, but she walked inside anyway. The lobby was wide and open, with quiet lighting and elegant decor. A receptionist greeted her politely and directed her to the elevator. Her hands felt slightly cold as she pressed the button. When the elevator doors opened on the 12th floor, the man from the cafe, the one with the folder, was already waiting. He greeted her kindly and invited her to follow him down a hallway. He opened a door to a calm-looking room with large windows and a simple table. The rich woman was seated inside. She looked different today. Still well-dressed, still composed, but her expression was more open, less guarded. She gave a small nod as the waitress entered. "Thank you for coming," the woman said. The waitress sat down quietly. She wasn't sure what to expect. The woman folded her hands on the table. "I want to explain why I came back yesterday," she said. "Not just to apologize, but because your reaction told me something important." The waitress listened carefully. "There are many people," the woman continued, "who lose control when faced with stress or disrespect. But you didn't. You stayed steady. You answered calmly, confidently, and fluently in a language you had no reason to reveal." She paused. "It made me wonder who you really are." The waitress shifted slightly, unsure if she should feel nervous or flattered. The woman continued, "I work with an international team. We handle communication, research, and coordination for different projects across several countries. We are always looking for people who can think clearly under pressure and communicate across languages. The waitress blinked, trying to follow. "I am offering you a training position," the woman said simply. "A chance to learn. A chance to grow. A chance to use the skills you are keeping hidden in a cafe." There it was. The opportunity. The waitress wasn't sure how to respond. Her heart felt tight in her chest. "I know this is sudden," the woman added, "and I don't expect you to decide right away. But I believe you can do much more than what your current life allows." The woman's voice carried confidence. Not force, not pressure, just belief. The waitress lowered her gaze for a moment. She thought of her simple apartment, her long shifts, her predictable days. She thought of how she had once hoped for more but had placed that hope aside. The woman leaned back slightly. "If you choose to accept, the training will start next month. You'll have time to prepare. And you will be paid during the training as well." The man beside her slid a thin envelope across the table. "Inside is information about the program," he said. "If you read it, you'll understand more clearly." The waitress took the envelope gently, feeling its smooth surface between her fingers. The woman added quietly, "Whatever you decide, the offer stands. There is no obligation." The room fell into a soft silence. The waitress looked up, meeting the woman's eyes. She expected to see coldness or superiority again, but instead she saw sincerity, perhaps even respect. She let out a slow breath. "I don't know if I'm ready," the waitress admitted, "but I want to try." A small smile touched the woman's face. It was the first real smile she had seen from her. "Good," the woman said gently. "That's enough for now." The meeting ended calmly. The man escorted her back to the elevator, offering her a polite goodbye. When she stepped outside the building again, the city noise hit her softly, like a reminder that the world kept moving. But everything felt different for her. She looked at the envelope in her hands, the card in her pocket, the memory of the moment that had started all of this. An insult, a reply, a door opening. As she walked down the street, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, hope. Not the fragile kind that fades easily, but the steady kind that grows when life finally gives a sign that things can change. She didn't know where this opportunity would lead. She didn't know if she would succeed. But she knew one thing for certain. Her calmness had changed everything. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to build a new beginning. She took another deep breath, lifted her head, and continued walking, one step at a time, toward a future she never expected but now dared to reach for.